Hello, welcome to this PowerPoint on AC 3.2. AC 3.2 is entitled Describe the Contribution of Agencies to Achieving Social Control. Now actually there are three separate headings for this AC, so I'm going to produce three separate PowerPoints on each of the heading. So this is the first one, and the first heading is Behavioural Tactics. So this PowerPoint is basically looking at how the agencies of social control within the UK and Wales use behavioural tactics to achieve social control. And there's some specific behavioural tactics that have been stated in the syllabus that you need to know about and need to cover. So without further ado, let's dive in. So behavioural tactics, as I said, are the ways in which agencies seek to change individuals' behaviour to make them conform to the social norms and laws. We're going to look at two specific examples of behavioural tactics. The first one is ASBOs and criminal behaviour orders, because ASBOs have been replaced by criminal behaviour orders. And the second one is token economies, which we have touched on in Unit 2. So starting with ASBOs, antisocial behaviour orders. They were civil orders made against someone who's engaged in antisocial behaviour in the UK. And if you were given an ASBO, you didn't have a criminal record, but if you breached it, it became a criminal offence with a maximum of 5 years imprisonment. So it was designed to deter people from moving up the charts of criminality. So starts off with antisocial behaviour, leads to greater criminality. So the thought was, if you give them an ASBO, they don't have a criminal record, but it deters them from doing anything more serious, because they could get a maximum of 5 years for breaching that ASBO. Now, they were introduced by the Labour Party under Tony Blair in 1998. And as I said, the intent was to give the state a way to prevent and control low-level behaviour that would normally warrant a criminal prosecution and brings fear and misery to those living amongst it. And there's a little link there to a news article which talks about the introduction of them if you wish to have a look at that. Now, ASBOs weren't without controversy. Many critics suggested they became desirable to certain people as a badge to be respected amongst peers. So if you have a look at that link there, that will take you to a newspaper article from the BBC, which actually says that by introducing ASBOs, actually all that happened was youth decided, oh, I look hard if I've got an ASBO, so I'm going to try and get an ASBO. So it became a badge of office, something to be proud of. So it sort of defeated the object for which they were intended. And in the United Kingdom, an ASBO could be issued in response to what they said was conduct which caused or was likely to cause harm, harassment, alarm or distress to one or more persons not of the same household as him or herself, and where an ASBO is seen as necessary to protect relevant persons from further antisocial acts by the defendant. That's actually what the law stated. In England and Wales, they were issued by magistrates' courts, and there's another link there for you on YouTube to a little clip about ASBOs, which might be of interest to you. So issued by magistrates' courts, not a criminal conviction, didn't go on your record, but if you breached it, you got into more trouble. So there were lots of problems that antisocial behaviour dealt with, and these included things like noise pollution, so playing music consistently too loud, making louder intrusive noises, drunkenness, abandoned burnt out cars, joyriding, stealing, mugging, shoplifting, begging, vandalism, graffiti, criminal damage to property, loitering, dropping litter, fly tipping, dog fouling, drug dealing or taking, intimidation and bullying, spitting. There were loads of different relatively low level, I'm not sure that drug dealing is low level offences that could carry an ASBO. And here you've got an example of an ASBO here. So, did they work? Well, that gives you some idea. 18,500 issued, 10,000 breached, 5,000 jail sentences, so not that great. So it had some positive impact. So some studies and police reports suggested there was a reduction of crime in areas where ASBOs were implemented. But there was a high breach rate, large percentage of ASBOs are breached, which sort of indicated they failed to deter the target behaviour. For example, one study found that 53% of ASBOs issued between 1999 and 2011 were breached, so they didn't work. And they argued they had a disproportionate impact, and by that, concerns were raised about the disproportionate use of ASBOs against individuals with mental health problems or who were homeless. So that didn't seem right. And many argued it was just a postcode lottery. The effectiveness of ASBO varied depending on the area and the resources available to the police. So this lack of long-term solutions was another issue, because critics argued that ASBOs address symptoms rather than the root cause of the antisocial behaviour. So you weren't really dealing with the cause at all. So, what's happened here? CBOs replaced them. ASBOs went, and under the Antisocial Behaviour Criminal Policing Act of 2014, the ASBO was replaced with a CBO, a Criminal Behaviour Order. And a CBO tackles the most serious and persistent antisocial individuals where their behaviour is brought before a criminal court. So CBOs were designed to address and prevent antisocial behaviour following a conviction, so very different from the ASBO. And they could include prohibitions on specific actions or require offenders to participate in activities to address the root cause of their behaviour, something that the ASBOs didn't necessarily do. Examples include things like bans from certain locations, restrictions on alcohol consumption in public, or requirements to attend substance abuse programs or anger management courses. And here's an example of the criminal behaviour order for Dale Parkinson, and you can see there's a little map with a red ring around it here, and basically Dale is not allowed in that area at all unless he's accompanied by a staff member of the youth offending team by prior appointment. So that's part of his criminal behaviour order. So whatever he's been up to in that area doesn't happen anymore. And likewise, here we've got Darren Shaw. He can't enter this area here of Dewsbury unless he's got a planned appointment with a solicitor, his housing options, or his drug and alcohol treatment service. So that tells you something about the root causes of his offending. So CBOs deal with seriously antisocial individuals who caused harassment, alarm, or distress to others. It lasts for 2 years for adults and 1 to 2 years for under 18s. And breaching CBO like an ASBO can mean up to 5 years in prison for adults or 2 years detention for under 18s. Unlike an ASBO, the CBO can require someone to do something positive to improve their behaviour. For example, where someone's committed a drug-related offence, the CBO can require them to join drug treatment programs to address their addiction. And there's a YouTube clip there for you to see just that. So that's ASBOs and CBOs. Now let's look at token economies. Now, as we saw in Unit 2, the token economy is a behaviour modification programme used by some prisons and youth offenders institutions and psychiatric hospitals, and it aims to achieve social control by reshaping inmates' behaviour patterns so that they conform to what the institution requires. They're based on B.F. Skinner's work, operant learning theory, also called behaviourism, and the basic idea of the theory is that if a particular behaviour results in a reward of some kind, it's likely to be repeated. So the reward acts as a reinforcement of the behaviour. And a detailed description of token economies can be found in Unit 2 PowerPoint AC 4.1. So if you want to go down it in real detail, I would recommend going to that YouTube PowerPoint on my channel. So let's dive into it. So as I said, the token economy aims to achieve social control in the following way. The institution draws up a list of desirable behaviours such as obey the rules, interact positively with staff and inmates, stay drug-free, engage in a purposeful activity such as training or anger management programs, etc. And when the prisoner behaves in the desired way, they get a token. For example, each time a drug test shows they're clean, they receive a token. And these tokens can then be exchanged for rewards. In prison, that might be something like a phone call, tobacco, sweets, being allowed to have a TV in their cell, spend more time or more of the money they've earned. Now, increasingly, tobacco is not an option in UK prisons, but in other countries, that is the case. And through this selective reinforcement, the behaviour the institution desires becomes more likely, and the undesirable behaviour less likely. Now, in UK prisons, we use our form of token economy is called the Incentives and Earned Privileges Scheme. Now, we have looked at this already when we looked at prisons. This is just reinforcing it. So you've already seen these few slides, but hopefully this will just cement that knowledge a little deeper. So currently in UK prisons, prisoners can earn rewards for sticking to the rules. And there are 4 levels: entry, basic, standard and enhanced. Now, entry level is where those new to prison are put, and they are on entry level for 14 days, and at the end of 14 days they're reviewed and they go up to standard if they've met the criteria that has been specified. If they haven't met that criteria, they go on to basic. So this is basic, this is the very lowest. If prison staff don't think a prisoner has met the criteria for standard level, or think their behaviour has been poor, then the prisoner is put on basic level. This means they can only have certain things that the law says. It's as simple as that. So that's things like letters and visits, which they're allowed by law, but they're not allowed anything extra. So basic level must be reviewed after the first 7 days, and then at least 4 weeks after that. So they have the chance to move up to enhanced, so to standard. Now, there's a poster I found for what privileges you could earn on enhanced level. You can refer to that after I've gone through the other parts of this PowerPoint. So if a prisoner goes on to standard level, so they successfully completed entry level by taking part in prison activities, showing a commitment to their rehabilitation, behaving well, that's standard level. This means they get more visits, more letters, they may be allowed to have a TV in their cell, may be allowed to spend more of their money. If they're really good and they show a commitment to their rehabilitation, take part in work and other activities, follow prison rules for at least 3 months, they are considered for enhanced level. And they also need to show that where possible, they've helped other prisoners or staff. For example, by being a listener or mentor to others. So if a prisoner's enhanced, it's the top level in our prisons, it means they can have even more things. For example, they may be allowed to have their own clothes, have more visits, a TV in their cell, or spend more of their money. You can look back at that poster from the previous slide to see some other things. That's just specific to one particular prison. And this shows what you can earn on the different levels. So at the moment, at the time of doing this PowerPoint in 2025, if you were on remand, that's what you earned a week. If you're on basic, standard or enhanced, and if you're convicted, you can see there is a big jump between what you earn a week, £5.50 if you're on basic and not behaving, £19.80 on standard, £33 on enhanced. Big difference, and of course money in prison goes a long way. So finally, how effective are these token economies? Well, the original study was done by Hobbs and Holt, as you'll see if you go back to the Unit 2 PowerPoint, on boys aged 12 to 15 in Alabama. And the behaviour did change and lasted throughout the 14-month study. So there's lots of evidence to suggest that token economy ideas work. However, other studies have found that when offenders leave prison and those rewards, those reinforcers stop, the desired behaviours disappear. But offenders return to crime more slowly compared with those who've not undergone the programme. So it does have its advantages. So the reality is that, you know, what you're doing is rewarding prisoners for behaviour you want. When they go out into the real world, you aren't really rewarded for doing what's expected of you. So when I turn up to the school gates, the head teacher isn't standing there at the gate with a wad of fivers and going, there you go, Mr. Sprenkel, well done, here's a fiver, you've turned up to work today on time. Oh, well done, you dressed smartly, have another £5. It doesn't work like that. You're not rewarded for doing what's expected of you. And that's perhaps the problem with token economies in the outside world. So you could argue that token economy programs make prisoners more manageable while they're in prison, but there's also a risk of behaviour being modified to suit the institution. In other words, the behaviour is just there to give the staff a quiet time rather than meet prisoners' rehabilitation needs for when they're released. And that is potentially an issue. And finally, it may be that the programs simply work because of the extra attention that prisoners are receiving as a result, or even just that the rules are being spelled out more clearly to them and not because of the tokens. It depends. It's a subjective opinion that you can form your own ideas on that. So that's ASBO's criminal behaviour orders and token economies, and we will in the next PowerPoint look at some other ways that institutions achieve social control. Okay, I'll see you at the next PowerPoint. Hopefully you found that informative. Have a good day. Goodbye.